How's it going, everyone? Coach Javi here with the Next Goal Wins TV. Some breaking news, hot off the press. Wanted to get a video going right away. Thomas Tuchel has been announced, well, not formally, but it's said that he's agreed on a contract to be the next England manager. The crazy part about all this was that just last night, I was in the studio here. I was going to make a video about why Pep Guardiola was probably going to be the next England manager, just because I thought everything just made sense. When we're talking about Pep, he got 115 charges kind of up in the air against Manchester City. His contract runs out at the end of the season. The sporting director, Chiki, officially announced his departure. They're bringing in somebody else. And based on what was going to happen with those 115 charges, which we obviously wouldn't know until the spring of 2025, I just thought that it might be the perfect time for Pep Guardiola to finally leave. And the England job is right there for the taking. Right now, they currently have Lee Carsley, who is was with one of the younger teams. I believe it was the U23 or U21s at England. Won the Euros with them. Very disappointing performance against Greece. I believe it's the first time that Greece has beat England in a really long time, if not ever, and it was at Wembley. A lot of experimentation going on, which is why a lot of people were upset at Gareth Southgate during the Euros. And I think even though they had a much better game against Finland, Lee Carsley did not do himself any favors with the Greece match. And it also didn't seem like he was super convinced on wanting to go and fully commit to trying to get the job. I think he wanted to have the backup with the younger age group because he knew that he probably wasn't the number one candidate for the position. So Thomas Tuchel, 51-year-old, his last stint was at Bayern Munich, which we all know did not go well at all. Lots of controversy with how he got the job in the first place. Just basically since the beginning of that season, it did not go well for him. And obviously, Bayer Leverkusen, Xabi Alonso had a fantastic season, so it was always going to be very difficult for Thomas Tuchel. Prior to that, he's had stints at Chelsea, at PSG. So he's got a lot of experience. He's won Champions Leagues before. The type of person he is, the type of commanding manager, I think is something that England is going to want. Whether he gets the respect from the locker room right away, obviously he's not as big of a name as Pep. If it was up to the FA, I believe Pep was their number one choice. The FA has done their research. They created a shortlist. There's no way that they did not do their diligent research to make sure that they didn't leave anybody out who could potentially be the best person for the job, which is why it leads me to believe that the talks that they've had with Pep Guardiola must mean he's decided to stay at Manchester City, or he's just not interested or cannot give them an answer until, spring of 2025 when everything gets sorted out with the court case and the 115 charges against Manchester City. They obviously cannot wait until 2025 to appoint a manager. It's already been a little bit of time since the Euros. The other person that I thought might have been a really, really good fit for the English national team was Eddie Howe. Fantastic job that he's done at Newcastle. I just don't know if it was the right time for Eddie Howe to make the move to the English national team. I'm sure at some point in his career he's going to want to do it. He's still a very young manager, but the project that he's got going on at Newcastle right now, I don't think he's going to want to leave that halfway through when he just made Champions League football. He's developing a roster that can compete in multiple competitions across Europe, and I think he's going to get close to a consistent Champions League finish in the Premier League, but also I think in his head that project will be finished once he wins a Premier League, and he's got the full backing of Newcastle. They've got a lot of money to spend, so I think he's going to want to keep them until they become one of the really big clubs consistently competing against Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester City for a Premier League title. So I think he's not fully done with that project, which is why the England job does not make sense for him right now, especially with him being a young manager. He's going to have the time in the future to eventually get that position. Is Thomas Tuchel a good appointment? I'm not fully convinced. I think he has really good moments and really good spells where he gets his teams to perform and to win trophies, which I think is the most important, right? I think it always happens with Thomas Tuchel is that his teams go on a really bad spell and ultimately ends up with him losing his job. So he's been sacked at Chelsea. He's been sacked at Munich. He's been sacked at PSG. And overall, I just think it's a big risk. The difference between coaching a national team and coaching a club team is it's more about the player selection, making sure you pick the right players, making sure you simplify the tactics as much as possible. The only national team in the world where you can get them to play a very specific style, in my opinion, is Spain, just because of all of the groundwork that Barcelona and Real Madrid and some of the other Spanish teams have done, where it's a very similar style. All of the other national teams, specifically England, you're getting players from all over the place with completely different styles. I mean, even if the majority of your players are coming from the Premier League, within the Premier League itself, there's so many different styles of play that it's hard to bring them into one team and get them to play a certain way. I think the only coach that can really do that is probably Pep Guardiola. I think just his knowledge for the game and his expertise will allow him to bring players into a camp that you only have a certain amount of time and right from the start get them to play in the exact way that he wants them to play. I think Thomas Tuchel, the reason why he was attractive to the English FA is the fact that he is a very commanding coach. He's going to be very good as far as player management, and I think his ability to pick the right team when it matters the most, especially without having the club for a long time, just like how he stepped in at Chelsea and won the Champions League right away. I think that's really attractive for a national team that you're only going to get them for a certain amount of time before they actually have to play in competitive matches. So the crazy thing about this all as well is the fact that not too long ago when they were debating on whether they were going to take Ten Hag out at Manchester United, Thomas Tuchel was on the short list for that position before ultimately they decided to stick with Ten Hag. I think if they would have let Ten Hag go, Thomas Tuchel would no longer be an option for England because he would be managing Manchester United at the moment. So crazy how things work out. I think he's going to be pretty happy about that because he's got some of the best players in the world. And although this is different as far as, at Chelsea, at Bayern Munich, at PSG, you have a pretty open checkbook. You can also say the same thing when it comes to the English national team. When it comes to the amount of talent that's available, you pretty much have an open checkbook in that respect, where you're not going to be suffering for certain positions and you don't have a certain world-class player in this position. For England, he's actually going to be on the other side of that, where he's going to have to make a decision whether he puts Cole Palmer, whether he puts Phil Foden, whether he puts Jude Bellingham, whether he puts Harry Kane, whether he puts Ollie Watkins. He's got so many options to choose from that I think Thomas Tuchel just has to make sure that he's making the right decisions as far as the player selection. And I think he's also going to be coaching them to be a lot more aggressive and a lot less defensive than we've seen in the past with Gareth Southgate. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? Is Thomas Tuchel a good manager? Do you think they should have waited for Pep? They should have taken that huge risk to see what would happen at the end of the whole court case with Manchester City? Or are you guys pretty happy with that? Let me know in the comment section down below.